Hello everyone, up for sale today is a Tandy Model 1, TRS-80 Model 1. It's actually a complete setup, and just wanted to walk around it real quick and show a little video of it. I actually have original TRS-80 cassette drive. The Model 1, this is actually a 16K Model 1 that's never been opened, which is kind of nice. It actually has the original factory seal on the bottom. It's working pretty well. We also, instead of having the original drives, what I did was I have this external drive unit here, which has two of the Gotek USB floppy drives modified with the HXC code. The HXC code will pretty much allow these drives to support any format. Right now they're just working as a single-sided Tandy disc 35 track. This expansion chassis or expansion interface does not have a double-sided card in it, but it does have the Tandy serial card in it, and I went ahead and left that in there instead. But it's nice to know that if you ever do decide to go with a double-sided interface or double-density interface, you can actually use these floppies already to get it to work. Let me walk around the back here. Actually, that plastic cover right there goes over the cover for the floppy controller on the back. And interestingly, when I bought this unit, it came with no expanded memory in it. It did not have a floppy drive with it. That's why I used these guys. And I guess they were just using it for the serial port, which unfortunately I don't have the cable for, but I went ahead and left the card in there. I don't have any real way to test it, and I'm not going to bother making a cable for it, because with the USB floppy emulators, it's actually going to be a lot easier just to take some data from your computer, put them on the USB drive, and then move it over, rather than trying to use a serial port. But if you wanted to try to use a printer, or do for some reason want to transfer data over to it, the serial interface should be working. Let me pause for a second here, and I'm going to put the camera on a tripod, and I'm going to boot it up and show it in operation. Hello again. Now that I've got it set up on the tripod, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. There's an order that seems to work best for turning this on, and I'm sure this was probably the case even without the standard external floppy. But the first thing is to turn on the expansion chassis and to turn on the monitor. Then turn on the floppies. Wait for them to come up. 0 and 36 will come up there. And now turn on the computer. And there it is, booting up new DOS. So as you can see on the USB floppy emulator, there's actually two different drives in there. The bottom one is drive 0, the top one is drive 1. You can hit the up and down buttons to change which discs. And I've pre-prepared I think it's about 50 images that I found on various websites out there for collectors of the TRS-80 Model 1, just to have something to get started. But if you're familiar with the HXC floppy emulator, you can use the emulator software there to create floppy disk images for this guy from pretty much any Tandy disk. Right now, unfortunately, it is limited to the single-sided discs, just because it is set up, as single-sided without the double density. I'm sorry, not single-sided, but the single-density discs. And you'll need a double-density controller to read everything, but at least you can do that. And that's why I went ahead and put two drives on there, because you pretty much need drive 0 for the new DOS disk, or for whatever DOS you're using, and drive 1 for your data. It just works out easier. And so now when you do a directory, you'll see it's coming up, and it's hitting drive 1. And right now, drive disk 36 on here is actually just the Diagnostics disk. So let me, just to show you how this works, I'm going to zoom into the floppy for a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the Diagnostics program, and when I run diag here, you'll see the floppies access. Drive 0 hits first, then drive 1, because that's where diag is. And now it's loaded. So let me go back over to the monitor. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the Diagnostics on this machine and show that the memory test completes. I'm not going to run the disk test, because they're really kind of pointless to run on the solid state USB emulator. Let me turn the contrast down just a little bit. Let's get a better shot. There, it's a little bit better. So this machine does now have 48K of memory, so I'm going to do 48. Oops. Protect time, memory no. Cassette recorder. It does, but I'm not going to run the test on it, and I'll load some software on it. The test is kind of pointless for that. I've run that as well, and it does pass, but it's kind of slow. I do not have a printer, so I'm going to say no. Upper lowercase, I don't believe so. It seems to only do uppercase. It does have the serial interface, but I don't have the loopback cable on there to do the test, so I'm going to skip that one as well. And finally the drives, and I'm not going to test those either, as I said. I really just want to run the memory test. So you can run the others, and interestingly, I ran one of the RAM tests does not seem to complete, and I used a couple of the different Tandy emulators, and that one fails on those as well. So the glitch test, I don't even like running it because it seems to fire the relay in the expansion interface over and over again. So I don't usually run that one. The refresh test will pass, so let me run that one real quick because it just takes a second to run. Or a few seconds to run. And there, that one completed successfully. So now I'm going to run the complete test, and this one takes quite a while to run. So I'm going to fast forward the video through that part, and you'll just see it run quicker. But I think it takes somewhere around 15 or 20 minutes, so I'm just going to let it run here. Okay, so now I'm going to run the complete test. Enter. And it's doing the complete RAM test now. And it's going to run for a little while, so fast forwarding now. Alright, the RAM test completed successfully. Looks like everything's good there. So I'm going to go ahead and reset the machine. Oh yeah, you got to hit enter twice here for some reason. I'll push the reset button. Okay. So it's booted back up now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to load up a few programs off of disk. I'm changing the disk we had selected, and let's just pick a different one, disk 31. Let's see what's on there. So there's Lander. Let's just run that. Adventure International. I actually have never played this one. Nope. Nope, that went poorly. Alright, so let me reset it one more time here. Well, you've seen it coming up here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart it into BASIC and load from the cassette. Now, I made a cassette that I think it was PlayCas, which is a utility that you can take cassette files off the internet and play them back as an audio file. And I did that initially just to test the cable that I made. The keyboard, or the cassette cable that comes with this is not an original cable. It's actually one that I made. And it works great. Everything's working on it. In fact, it even plays sound, and I'll show that here in a minute. Interestingly, I do also have the 5-pin cable which connects the TRS-80 to the back of the expansion chassis for the cassette port, so that way you can use the dual cassettes. There's only one cassette with this unit, and I have only one cable on there. But I'm going to go ahead and reboot back into BASIC, holding down break. It's coming up after memory size. So I have the tape rewound. I'm going to go ahead and put it in over here. And I'm going to go ahead and hit play on the tape deck over here. As you can see, it's doing as it should. It's not doing anything yet. Let me just lock it there for a second. Now over on the computer, type C load G, and then off she goes. I'm going to go back over to the monitor. In a moment you'll see the load indicator up in the upper right hand corner there. There we go. Well, I tried to load the first graphics demo that I had on this cassette, and unfortunately it was giving me some grief. And I did get it to load once before, but for whatever reason it wouldn't work this time. So I went ahead and I tested Swamp War, and it worked. So I'm going to go ahead and show that one loading up. And I had a lot of trouble getting the tape to work, and I remember even back when I was a kid using my Commodore, it took me 5 or 6 attempts sometimes to get the programs to save properly, and a lot of times they wouldn't load properly either. And honestly, it was a little easier on the Commodore because you didn't have to deal with the volume level. And incidentally, I seem to get the best result here when I'm going about halfway between 3 and 4. Seems like you have to turn it down a little bit if you don't use the cable through the expansion chassis. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show, I've got it kind of queued up in the right spot here. I've got play pressed on the tape, but it's not running yet because the machine's off, so it's not going. But let me go ahead and go back to the computer, and I'm going to hold the brake key down and turn it on, which will bring it up in basic mode. Let me get the focus right here. Okay, so actually, it's a binary program, so you go to System, and the name of the program is Swamp, and it's running. And the tape was already pressed in, so now you can see up in the upper right hand corner it is loading this time, and you can actually see the cursor flashing this time. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward it because it takes it about a minute to load. Okay, just finished. So execute that, you slash, and up she comes. So this program has sound, and what I'm going to do is over here, if you guys are probably familiar with this trick, looks like they did this in a lot of Tandy programs. I have a little amplified speaker plugged in over here, and I'm going to take the record output from the Tandy and plug it in. Adapter there. And now it's plugged into that speaker, and by the way, my speaker is not included. I just have it over here for test purposes. And go back to the computer. Alright, now that it's connected, and there we go. I don't know how to play this. Oh, I guess I'm shooting. Oh, there we go. And I got shot. Yeah. Anyway, you get the idea. So I know the, let me go ahead and turn it back off here, and I'm going to go back into DOS. Got the drives plugged in, so it'll be right back up into new DOS. I put the cassette in here because I know that there's a lot of games out there that people like to use with it, but it is a little bit finicky, and I don't think it's because it's old. Honestly, I think that's just because of how it behaved. The tape that I'm including with it, put the volume between 3 and 4, and it'll work pretty well. I have one other tape that's actually an original Tandy tape that I'm going to include with this too, and that's Eliza. Unfortunately, I've tried about 10 times to get Eliza to load through this tape drive, and no matter what I've done, no matter where I've set the volume, I just can't seem to get it to load. I have a pretty expensive Sony tape drive, or Sony tape player, so I went ahead and I used that, and I was able to get it to load on there, so I know that the tape is good, but unfortunately, I cannot get it to load through this Tandy. So it's probably just that the tape's a little worn out, and the tape player itself is old, and a combination of the two just means it won't work. But I basically used about the most expensive cassette player you could ever buy, and it did work with that. So maybe you record the tape to a computer or something, but just to know it's included on there, but it's not loading, unfortunately, for some reason. But since you have the USB floppy drives, I'm sure that's probably going to be what people want to use more. And now that we're back on the computer, I've got a different disk loaded up at the moment. Oh yeah, we already did Lander here, so let me just go back a few more disks and see what else we have in here. Looks like some disk utilities, which probably aren't going to be too necessary. And just to show you, you can see you've got a directory up here, and all I'm doing to change it, so if you go down to the drive, all you need to do is just hit the buttons to go back and forth, and we'll go to disk 21 here is actually what I meant to do. Now, if you see the directory that's there, if I do a directory again, can see it's a different disc. This one's an arcade one. So there's Gauntlet. Let's go ahead and load Gauntlet up. And I've got the sound hooked up now, so this game supports sound. We'll hear it. I don't know if it does. Oh, there you go. No, not the Gauntlet I was thinking it was going to be. Alright. So I'm going to go and do a soft reset real quick. Well, I think that's enough demonstration of what it can do and how it can work. Again, just note, you know, there's discs on here. There's actually stuff on drive 0 as well. I've got basically the same images on both of these keys, so you can interchange them. But I did label them drive 0 and drive 1, so you would be able to keep track of them. And you can change this one just as well. And there's a couple games that auto boot and so forth without the DOS disk, so you'll have to select those on drive 0 if you want those to boot. It's just going to work just like a regular Tandy. And go out and look at how to use the HXC emulator software, and that'll give you a really good idea about how you need to create disk images for this. You can take the existing files that are on these keys. I think it's disk 19 or something like that. There's a blank disk image out there, so you can copy that one as many times as you want and make some more disk images. So that's about all there is to say, other than this machine is pretty unique. It's got all the plastic ports, and like I said before, here's the port that actually goes over the floppy connector. Interestingly, this unit did seem to have only 16K, even though it had the expansion interface. It had the serial port in there, but all the ports were plugged up, so I don't even know if the original owner was even using the expansion chassis. I just wanted to get off the tripod for a minute and just show everything on the front of the machine here. I'll try to keep it in focus as much as I can. So, as you can see, all the covers are on, and even the cover on the computer here, but this one, I just cannot get it to stay in the right way. It wants to stick out a little bit. I'm sure that was a common issue. You actually can still get a pencil or something through there to hit the reset button on the back. Get a little better picture of it there. But all those covers are there. And the other thing that's really cool about this, and I'll show this in the photos on the listing, but this unit has never been opened. It still has the original factory seal on it. And I bought 32K of RAM, 4116 chips, put them in there, they passed memory tests, everything works. And those were actually new old stock chips from Bulgaria. Pardon me. But they seem to be working just fine in here. The only real issue that I can note is that the monitor itself, it takes a little while to warm up. Once it warms up, after, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes, it takes quite a bit, the image starts to stabilize. It's pretty stable right now because it's been on for a good hour, but when you first turn it on, it is a bit wobbly, and you know, it gets the normal glitchiness in the screen that I think all of these did. It seems to have gotten worse with the RAM even. Interestingly, there seems to be more glitchiness and more noise, but I think it's just all the refresh of all those extra memory chips is just causing a little bit of noise in the video signal. I'm not a real, you know, avid Tandy collector, so I don't know if that's normal behavior or what, but just note that it does do that. Again, once it warms up, seems fine. I'm guessing there's probably one of the older transistors in there that's taking a little while to get up to its proper specs until it warms up, and then after it does that, it's fine. The other thing to mention is it does have that serial board in there, which is pretty neat, but I don't have the serial cable, and I can't tell that it ever did have it. I'm not even sure why. Like I said, the expansion unit was on here because it was pretty clear the original owner did not have floppy drives, because this cover was still on there. And when I bought it, I got the expansion chassis, the monitor, and the computer, and the tape drive appears to have gone missing. I had a cable that was for a different type of tape drive than was here. So I went ahead and made a cable, and the cable, like I said here, that connects the expansion chassis to the cassette port is not original either. That's a cable that I just had sitting around, but it's pinned through with 5 pins and seems to be working fine. I also did do a test record from BASIC. The tape that's included here has some programs that we put from PlayCaz over to this machine, and that first one, which was a graphics demo, didn't work. I didn't test them all again. I mean, I loaded them when I did it, but at the very end there, I just wrote, you know, hello world in BASIC and saved it from BASIC, and it did save to the tape and worked. As I mentioned, ELIZA is also included. It's just the raw tape, no documentation or anything for it. And I was able to get that to load on another tape drive, but just unfortunately not on the tape drive that's included here. And the monitor itself and the computer itself seem to be in pretty good shape. I'll take some better photos of it and when we place it online on eBay, but let me just show the tape drive here itself a little bit. Oh yeah, and I do have the cover for the tape drive, which is pretty yellowed, but this came in there when I bought the unit as well. Okay, so back around the back. This is my custom floppy cable, and this used to be an external SCSI box for a DAT drive. Interestingly, I was missing the faceplate on it, and I was able to barely cram both of these drives in there. It has a fan in it as well for the power supply. Even though it's total overkill, that thing should pretty much last forever. And of course the 2 USB keys will come with it as well. So pretty much hook it up and you'll be ready to boot. Just be really careful when you hook it up to make sure you get the orientation correct on the cables. Pin 1 is actually towards the outside of the case here, so make sure you remember that when you put the floppy in. And also, as I mentioned before, seems like the best approach is to turn the expansion unit on first, then the floppy, then the computer, and it'll boot right up when you do that. It did glitch out on me once or twice when I first started playing with it. For whatever reason, it decided it didn't want to boot, but I've been using it for about 3 weeks now, and it seems to be pretty happy. And I think it's about ready to go out on the market. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll have her up on eBay, and my name is TexElec out there. My wife and I got this guy all cleaned up as good as she's going to look, I think. There's a few scratches here and there, but again, the photographs hopefully will show that a little better than I can get here in the video. Thanks again for watching, and have a good day.